July 1945. Somewhere along the Rhine, the war was over, but the tension wasn't. Beyond a line of wire and watchtowers, a group of captured German women worked under the morning sun. They had been nurses, clerks, and auxiliaries for the Wehrmacht, now prisoners of the very army they had once been told was savage. The camp smelled of dust, soap, and something else they couldn't place, a warm, smoky aroma drifting from the American side. They laughed quietly at first, mocking the sight of U.S. soldiers crouched over barrels, turning rows of yellow corn over open flame. To them, it looked childish, peasants playing with food instead of rationing it. Yet that laughter hid a hunger they didn't want to admit. Across the yard, American GIs called it chow time. It was a Sunday evening in a camp near Koblenz, and Sergeant Robert "Bobby" Turner had been ordered to organize a morale dinner for his men. They'd improvised grills out of fuel drums, filled the air with wood smoke, and brought out sacks of Midwestern corn shipped through Antwerp. For the soldiers, it was a reminder of home, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, a piece of America brought to a broken Europe. The German prisoners watched with suspicion. For months they had eaten cold barley soup and stale bread. To see their captors roast food for pleasure seemed almost obscene. Turner noticed their stares. He leaned to his cook and muttered, "They probably think we're wasting rations." The cook grinned and flipped another ear, its golden kernels bursting open as butter melted down its sides. The scent floated through the wire, mixing with the metallic smell of barbed steel and scorched timber. One of the German women, a former Red Cross orderly named Ingrid, wrinkled her nose. "Amerikanische Kinder," she whispered. "American children." Her companions laughed softly. But beneath the humor lay disbelief. These women had been told that the American army survived on canned meat and machine food, that it lacked culture and refinement. And now they watched men who could crush nations stand around a grill, laughing, drinking weak coffee, and waiting patiently for corn to turn the right shade of gold. The contradiction was unsettling. In the new Europe of ruins and ration cards, joy itself had become a luxury. The guards approached the fence. "You ladies hungry?" one of them called. His accent was thick and friendly, the voice of a farm boy turned soldier. The women exchanged glances, but said nothing. "We got plenty," he added, lifting a steaming ear of corn with his tongs. Ingrid crossed her arms. "We don't eat animal feed," she muttered in German. Another guard, hearing the tone if not the words, shrugged. "Suit yourselves." That night, the camp cooled as the sun dropped over the hills. Smoke hung low over the compound, and the scent of corn still drifted in the air. Inside their tent, the German women sat on their bunks, quiet now. Hunger gnawed at them, not starvation, but the dull emptiness of monotony. One of them, Lotte, whispered, "It smelled sweet." Ingrid scowled but didn't argue. War had taken their pride and left only reflexes of defiance. Yet something about that smell, simple, unmilitary, human, had stirred a memory of peace. The next morning, Turner received new orders. The German women would assist the American cooks in cleaning up the food area. They arrived under guard, armed with brooms and buckets. On the tables lay half-eaten corn cobs, ashes, and a few unclaimed portions wrapped in foil. The Americans were joking nearby, the easy confidence of victors. As Ingrid worked, she couldn't resist glancing at one of the leftover cobs. Its charred surface glistened with salt and melted butter. She hesitated, then, with a furtive look around, broke off a piece. The first taste surprised her. It was soft, smoky, almost creamy, nothing like the coarse-feed corn she remembered from German farms. Her eyes widened. One of the guards noticed, chuckling. "Good, huh?" he said. She froze, unsure whether to answer. Then, unable to hide the truth, she nodded once. Another woman reached for a piece. Soon, the tent filled with quiet chewing, the sound of former enemies discovering something wordless and shared. That afternoon, a small group of American soldiers wheeled another drum to the edge of the women's compound. "For you ladies," Turner said, smiling. "Peace offering." The women stood uncertain, but when the first kernels began to pop and sizzle, laughter returned, this time different. The suspicion was gone. Ingrid even asked, through broken English, "Butter, please?" Turner handed it over without hesitation. It was a strange sight. Women who had worn the eagle and cross of the Reich standing shoulder to shoulder with men who'd crossed oceans to defeat them. all of them united, if only for an hour, by the taste of corn. In the distance, the Rhine shimmered, carrying the debris of a war that had consumed continents. Yet here, in a camp still wrapped in barbed wire, a small reconciliation was taking place, not with treaties or speeches, but with food cooked over a barrel. Reporters visiting the camps later wrote about these moments, calling them the first signs of normal humanity returning to Europe. The U.S. Army mess officers noted that many German POWs, men and women alike, were fascinated by American food habits, coffee breaks, peanut butter, barbecues. To them, these things represented an optimism that had survived the war untouched. Ingrid would later write in her repatriation papers that the Americans fed us as if we were guests, not prisoners. She never forgot the taste of that corn, the sweetness, the warmth, the way it silenced pride and memory alike. Years later, when she told her children about it, she laughed at herself for once thinking it was animal feed. But in 1945, as night fell again over the Rhine camp, no one could have predicted how that single act, the sharing of food, would become symbolic of something greater. The war had shattered nations and poisoned trust, yet here, within a barbed fence, two sides had found a brief, fragile bridge made not of diplomacy, but of empathy. And as the Americans packed up their makeshift grills, the German women lingered at the fence, holding their corn like treasure. Somewhere in the darkness, a guard called out, "Get some sleep, ladies. Tomorrow's another day." One of them laughed softly. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was relief. The following morning, when Turner's men returned to cook breakfast, they found a small sign drawn in chalk on the German side of the fence. Danke, für das Mais. Thank you for the corn. It was crude, shaky handwriting, but for the Americans, it said everything. No generals, no battle reports, no victory parades could have captured the moment's quiet power. In the ruins of Europe, long before the Marshall Plan or the Berlin airlift, peace began not with speeches, but with the taste of grilled corn. Cliffhanger: what Turner and his men didn't know was that this small act of kindness would soon spark something unexpected, a secret exchange between captors and captives that would challenge military discipline, reshape camp policy, and reveal how empathy itself became a weapon of peace. By mid-August 1945, Camp C-47 near Koblenz had changed. The barbed wire still stood, but the mood inside had softened. Guards no longer barked orders. They spoke like neighbors. And every Sunday evening, when the smell of smoke began to rise, the German women knew what it meant: corn night. What had started as an accidental act of sharing had become a ritual. But beneath that simple kindness, something far more complex was unfolding, a quiet transformation inside the camp that no manual had prepared for. The Americans called it Project Goodwill, though officially it never existed. Captain Raymond Haskins, the camp commander, believed morale could be a weapon stronger than fences. "You feed the enemy, and you feed peace," he once said during a briefing. To him, it wasn't about mercy, it was control through compassion. A full stomach made a calm prisoner, and calm prisoners made secure camps. Yet the results went beyond security. The corn had become a cultural bridge. When Haskins authorized a small garden plot within the women's section, the German prisoners surprised everyone. They cultivated vegetables in perfect rows, even painting signs in English: beans, tomatoes, cabbage. Within weeks, American soldiers were trading seeds for hand-sewn patches and embroidered scarves. One corporal wrote home that the ladies make better soup than our kitchen crew. Such exchanges, trivial on paper, had profound effects on morale reports. U.S. Army Camp Welfare File, August 1945. Behind the wire, Ingrid found herself drawn into the camp's makeshift kitchen. She had once been trained in field sanitation, and now, under the supervision of an American cook named Walter Tex Daniels, she helped prepare meals for both sides. The corn remained central: grilled, boiled, mashed, or turned into fritters. Daniels, a farmhand from Texas, showed her how to season with butter, salt, and a dash of chili. "Gives it soul," he'd say, tossing the spice with a grin. Ingrid imitated him carefully, fascinated by how food could carry personality. It was Daniels who introduced the women to American canning techniques. They watched as he sterilized jars, filled them, sealed them tight. "Keeps good for months," he said proudly. explaining how wartime logistics depended on these small miracles. He told them about engineers at Ball Corporation who'd perfected tin sealing, and how General Electric's portable stoves were transforming field kitchens. For the German women, raised under shortages and propaganda, the scale of American supply felt unreal. Factories, railways, shipping lines, all synchronized to feed millions. It was industrial compassion. One afternoon, a Red Cross inspector visited the camp. In his notes, he described unusually high cooperation among female POWs and evidence of cultural exchange through food practices. Red Cross inspection log, September 1945. The guards joked that the report should have mentioned corn as the camp's unofficial diplomat. But not everyone approved. Higher headquarters grew concerned about overfamiliarity with prisoners. An internal memo warned that the line between humane treatment and fraternization must remain clear. Haskins defended his policy, arguing that order comes easiest when men and women feel human again. The corn feasts, he insisted, reduced escape attempts to zero and discipline incidents by half. He wasn't wrong. Statistics from nearby camps without such programs showed unrest and sabotage rates 3 times higher. Camp Command Summary Sheet, September 1945. Meanwhile, the German women were changing too. At first, they had spoken only German among themselves, maintaining a wall of language. But over weeks, English words began to slip in: butter, salt, good. They laughed more, even teased the Americans for burning their corn. When the first snow fell, Turner rigged up an indoor grill from spare parts, using an oil drum and scavenged sheet metal. The women clapped when the flames took. For a moment, the world beyond the fence, Nuremberg trials, rationing, broken cities, felt far away. Late one evening, Ingrid asked Daniels why Americans roasted corn at all. He told her it came from home fairs and harvests, from families gathering under wide skies after long summers. It's how we remember what we fight for, he said. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. To the Germans, food had been about survival. To the Americans, it was about belonging. That difference carried a quiet power. Haskins soon expanded the experiment. Under his supervision, select German women began assisting in the American mess hall, working alongside male POWs. It was a controversial move, but the results spoke for themselves. Cleanliness improved, rations stretched further, and even the guards began eating better. "We're learning from them as much as they're learning from us," wrote one quartermaster in his report, Quartermaster Field Notes, October 1945. Yet not all exchanges were official. Every week, as the Americans cooked corn for themselves, a few extra ears would go missing, spirited across the fence through quiet understanding. The women had started saving small trinkets in return: carved buttons, embroidered handkerchiefs, drawings of the camp gardens. It became a silent barter of goodwill, beyond regulation but tolerated by the watchtowers above. One night, a rumor spread that General Eisenhower's inspection team might visit. Guards scrubbed the barracks. Prisoners hid the makeshift gifts, and Turner warned everyone to keep things by the book. But when the inspectors arrived, they didn't condemn the corn nights. They observed in silence, watching German women laugh freely for the first time since captivity. One officer reportedly muttered, "If this is fraternization, maybe we need more of it." Officers' Field Log, October 1945. Then came a turning point. As winter deepened, rations grew tighter. Supply lines were strained across occupied Germany, and camp inventories dropped by nearly 20%. The corn, once abundant, became scarce. Haskins faced orders to reduce non-essential food use. That Sunday, for the first time in months, no smoke rose from the barrels. The women noticed immediately. By dusk, silence fell over the compound. Ingrid sat near the fence, staring at the cold ashes. When Turner approached, she spoke softly through the wire. "No corn." He shook his head. "No shipments," he said. Her face fell. For a moment, the wall between them returned, not of steel, but of memory. War, hunger, defeat. She turned away, ashamed of how much she'd come to rely on that simple meal. 2 days later, Daniels appeared carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were 3 ears of corn, the last from his personal ration. "Don't tell the captain," he said with a wink. Ingrid looked at the gift, eyes wide, unsure whether to cry or laugh. "For Christmas," he added. She accepted it like a relic. That night, The women roasted it quietly inside a tin barrel, sharing it piece by piece. The smell drifted into the dark, faint but unmistakable. What began as curiosity had become connection. The corn was no longer just food. It was a memory of dignity, a symbol that even among ruins, something pure could survive. But soon, higher orders would arrive from Frankfurt, orders that would test Haskins, Turner, and everyone in Camp C-47. Cliffhanger: the Americans' simple act of kindness was about to collide with military regulation, and what followed would decide whether compassion could endure inside the machinery of occupation. The orders came on January 3, 1946. They were brief and absolute. All unauthorized fraternization activities are to cease immediately. Signed by headquarters in Frankfurt, the directive didn't name Camp C-47 specifically, but everyone knew it was aimed at them. The corn nights, the shared meals, the laughter that drifted through barbed wire, all of it was suddenly against regulation. Captain Haskins read the memo twice, his jaw tightening. For months, he'd watched hardened prisoners regain their humanity, and now bureaucracy demanded it be undone. That evening, he gathered his staff in the mess hall. Turner, Daniels, and the guards stood silently as Haskins placed the memo on the table. "They think kindness weakens discipline," he said, voice low. "They've never seen what discipline looks like when it's built on respect." His words hung in the air like smoke. None of them spoke, but every man knew what he meant. The corn might have started as food, but it had become something sacred. Across the fence, the German women sensed change before anyone spoke. The Americans were quieter. No fires burned that night. Ingrid, now fluent enough to ask, called out through the wire, "No more Sunday?" Turner hesitated. "Orders," he said simply. She nodded once, understanding the tone. "Always orders," she whispered. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere cooled. The women returned to strict routines, and the guards resumed clipped commands. The laughter that once defined Camp C-47 faded into the hum of generators and boots on gravel. Yet beneath the surface, small acts of rebellion continued. Daniels would slip a few kernels of corn into rations, wrapped in paper. Turner smuggled a matchbox filled with chili powder across the fence. The women reciprocated with hand-stitched patches shaped like corn leaves. It was their silent protest against a system trying to erase empathy. Reports from other camps during that winter told a grim contrast. In facilities without cultural contact, morale collapsed. Theft, fights, and attempted escapes rose sharply. U.S. Occupation Command Log, January 1946. By contrast, Camp C-47 recorded none. Haskins forwarded those numbers to Frankfurt without commentary, letting the results speak louder than policy. He knew his defiance couldn't last forever, but he also knew compassion had measurable power. In February, the Red Cross returned for inspection. Their observer noted a remarkable absence of hostility between guards and prisoners and credited sustained interpersonal trust built through shared food events. Though the term corn never appeared, every soldier who read the report knew what it meant. Still, higher command held firm. When new officers replaced Haskins in March, the fires went cold for good. Yet memories refused to die. On the day of their repatriation, Ingrid and the other women were lined up by trucks bound for Frankfurt. Snow fell in thin sheets, melting on the muddy ground. Turner stood watch as names were checked off. When Ingrid stepped forward, she paused. From her coat pocket, she pulled a small tin box. Inside, a handful of dried corn kernels. "For planting," she said softly. Turner swallowed hard. "Where?" he asked. "Home," she replied. "New beginning." They shook hands, ignoring regulations, and for a brief second, the war felt truly over. That spring, back in Germany's shattered countryside, Ingrid kept her promise. She planted the kernels in a narrow strip of soil beside her family's ruined farmhouse near Kassel. The land was broken, littered with debris and rusted shell fragments, but she cared for it anyway. When the first green shoots emerged, her mother wept. They called it the American crop. It wasn't much, just a few ears by summer, but villagers came to see it. To them, it represented survival, hope, and the strange kindness of former enemies. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Turner had returned to Iowa. He couldn't forget the image of German women smiling through camp wire, tasting grilled corn for the first time. He told the story at local fairs, to friends, to anyone who asked what victory really looked like. It wasn't when the guns stopped, he'd say. It was when they laughed. His words were later quoted in a local paper, Des Moines Register, August 1946. Over time, similar stories surfaced across occupied Europe. American soldiers sharing chocolate with children, GIs helping rebuild barns, POWs teaching handicrafts to guards. Historians later called it the Quiet Peace, a psychological shift that laid the groundwork for reconciliation long before treaties were signed. U.S. Strategic Policy Review, 1946. The legacy of Camp C-47 lingered. Years later, U.S. sociologists studying postwar recovery cited the camp as an example of morale integration through humanitarian routines. In their notes, they described how emotional restoration preceded political stability. It wasn't grand strategy, it was ordinary compassion. Even the smallest gesture, like a shared meal, could rewire the mind of an enemy. By 1948, when the Berlin airlift began, the philosophy behind those corn nights resurfaced in new form: food as diplomacy. Air crews dropped flour, milk, and candy to starving civilians, echoing the same belief Turner and Haskins had once acted on, that nourishment built bridges faster than any speech. Feed them first, one pilot wrote in his logbook, then talk peace. Ingrid's life followed its own quiet arc. She married a schoolteacher, raised 2 children, and each summer planted a small patch of corn. When visitors asked why, corn being so rare in German gardens, she'd smile and say, because once it was kindness. In her diary, found years later by her granddaughter, she wrote, "It tasted of smoke and butter, but also of forgiveness." They shared their harvest. I learned that peace, like corn, must be grown by hand. The men of Camp C-47 scattered after discharge, yet many kept in touch. Daniels sent letters for years, always signing off with a joke, still grilling, still burning the butter. Turner went back to farming, but he kept one relic from his service, a scorched tin plate from those first corn nights, hanging on his barn wall. Visitors thought it was a war souvenir. He never corrected them. In the end, the story of the German women who laughed at grilled corn was more than an anecdote. It was a quiet lesson about power and humanity. War had trained people to see each other as categories: enemy, prisoner, victor. But a handful of corn stripped those titles away, revealing something older than nations: the need to share warmth in a cold world. By the time historians rediscovered the camp records decades later, the participants were gone. Only fragments remained: inspection logs, faded photographs, a single note reading, "Good conduct due to food integration." But to those who knew, that phrase carried the weight of everything lost and learned. In the final reckoning, the soldiers' guns had enforced victory, but the corn had sustained it. Empires and ideologies collapsed, yet the memory of a simple meal endured, whispered through generations. It reminded both sides that compassion is not weakness, and that sometimes peace begins not with treaties or generals, but with smoke, butter, and a shared ear of corn on a cold European night.